grab a front row seat to the untold stories as we talk about how to live life on your terms. You're officially part of the inner circle. Welcome to Courtside with Courtney. And don't worry, I comped your ticket. Today, we have my girlie Audrey back for episode 2, our second episode together. I'm not calling it a part 2 because I feel like it's a totally different episode, but you're back. We're going to run it back. You guys loved hearing from Audrey, and so I actually thought it would be fun to touch on totally different topics. I guess we briefly touched on them last time, but we didn't really get into like the meat of it. So we're going to talk about relationships, being best friends with your partner, that dynamic, being a new mom, keeping it spicy, like all the things, right? Because I feel like it's not something that you publicly talk about, but you have a lot of really good insights. So let's run it back to you and Rigo start dating.
Yeah.
You're like in college.
Yeah. I was 20 years old when we started dating,
which is crazy.
31 now. That was right before I turned 21, like the month before.
I mean, 11 years. You've been married. Has it been 3?
It'll be 3 years this year.
October of this year.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of good things happen in October.
I know. Yeah.
And then your son obviously being born in October.
Yeah.
Which is pretty crazy. So you guys met in college.
Yeah.
And then what?
We met in college. We didn't date in college. I dated him at the end of my college experience, but he had already graduated. We had mutuals. I knew of him. I mean, every time we would go to the bar, like I would run into him and we would like be flirty, but he never asked for my number. I would avoid him in the hallways going to class because I would just have gotten done with cheer at like 5 a.m. and I would be going to my 8 a.m. and I would look awful and I would just be like, oh my gosh, don't look at me. And so he was like, you always avoided me. And then we ended up meeting up at a mutual friend's birthday in Austin. We hooked up. It just happens like that sometimes. And then we have talked every day since then.
That's so crazy.
Yeah.
The interesting thing too is like, I've heard this story from Rigo's perspective. And he's like, oh, Audrey was the hottest cheerleader there. I had to date her. Like, he like had his eye on you, even though he was kind of low-key playing it cool.
I know. He wrote like a poem like a little bit later on. And he would be in the stands during the basketball games. And he told one of his friends, he was like, I'm going to marry that girl.
Really?
Yeah. And that was when he was still in college. So we both like had a crush on each other. But
that's so crazy. When you know, you know. Mm-hmm. But I actually, the wedding that I went to in Italy, my friend Missy, a couple of weeks ago, her mom was saying as part of her speech that she came in to the kitchen because the groom or her now husband is like friends with her older stepbrother. And so they like kind of grew up together. And she came into the kitchen when she was like 12 and she was like, I'm going to marry Andrew, and like said it and just knew when she was like 12. And the mom was like, all right. So, and she did. And so it's so funny because like sometimes you just know.
Yeah.
And then at the same time though, right? It's like this sort of mix between when you know, and you have this really strong connection with someone and these feelings, but a relationship is a lot of work.
Yes.
And it is a conscious choice. Like the older I've gotten, the more I realize how conscious the choice has to be to grow together, to work on your relationship, to really prioritize your relationship. Yeah. It's not just like, oh, you have a connection, and then you get married and it's good. It's like, no. You're going to go through ups and downs, hard patches, times when you're going, different directions you need to come together. I think you have to have that when you know, feeling in order to want to put in all that work.
Yeah.
At least that's my opinion, because obviously I've been in a situation where I just felt like, oh, that wasn't my person.
Yeah.
And so then you put in the work and it's like, it's not meant to be. It's never going to, converge, I feel like.
Yeah.
But I want to talk about like the different phases of the relationship. So you guys start dating, you're still in college, he's out of college.
Yeah.
And were you long distance at this point?
Yeah, we were long distance. And I feel like that forced us to learn how to communicate and really establish a good foundation. Obviously, a physical connection is really important and you do need to have that and you need to have that chemistry. But I think that sometimes you can get caught up in that and you don't really sit down and talk. Totally. And you don't find out, is there something further than infatuation? Because we all go through infatuation briefly with anybody. who we're interested in. And that doesn't mean that, like, that can sometimes like mislead you into thinking that there's a spark.
Totally.
When, that'll fizzle and the substance isn't there. So long distance, 10 out of 10 for working on communication.
I actually agree. And then you also really have like quality time when you spend it together too. I think for me personally, I'm curious if you agree, like the physical connection is either there or it's not.
Yeah.
I think it gets better. Like the sex gets better, the chemistry, like everything gets better hypothetically if it's your person, the more you spend time with them. Because the deeper you know someone, the more meaningful that kind of thing is, which obviously makes it better. But you can have good chemistry with somebody in that regard, like you're saying, and then there's nothing underneath it.
Yeah. Yeah. You can have good sex and you can't talk to the person.
Yeah.
It's like talking to a wall.
Yep.
So,
Or like you almost get fooled. It's like the wool gets pulled a little bit over your eyes because you think like, oh, we have such a good connection. And I like to bifurcate between connection and chemistry and compatibility.
Yeah.
Very different.
Yes.
You can have a really good connection and good chemistry energetically or like physically and not have any actual compatibility. Maybe you're raised super differently. Maybe you don't want the same things. You don't have the same morals and values and goals. And so you can have those feelings of, like you're saying, infatuation without actually having what it takes to sustain a relationship, right?
Absolutely.
And which begs the question, like, is love enough? But I think that I heard something one time, which I agree with so fully. And that's if you have love, but the absence of respect and trust, it's toxic.
Yeah.
And I think like that to me is adjacent to the scenario, right? Where it's like, you can think you love someone, like I love them, but probably it's really just infatuation.
Yeah.
It becomes unhealthy and it's toxic because you don't trust them and you don't respect them. And if you don't respect and trust them, then you really don't have anything.
Yeah.
So you use that long distance time to go beyond the physical, the connection and the chemistry and really dig into the compatibility.
Yeah.
What were things you guys did in those like early stages to?
I think showing up as yourself always. Some of the things that I notice that I see in some other relationships can be that their partner is one way with them and is a totally different way with their friends.
Red flag.
And so honestly, I see that a lot where the guys are the ones that like are with their friends, they're shooting the shit. But like when their wives are there, they're buttoned up and they would never make those jokes in front of their wives. They hide that they're like drinking or they hide that they're smoking weed or something like, and they're always like, oh no, the wives are coming.
Or even like going out, like weird things to hide from your partner.
Yeah. And I feel like you need to be 100% yourself with your partner. There's no like just trying to be with that person once for a month and then like the Taylor Swift song and then just like pulling the wool over their eyes and then completely changing.
Like, a lot of people definitely do that.
Yeah. Rigo is who he is with me, the same as he is with his friends.
Yep.
And sometimes maybe his friends are like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you would say that in front of your wife. I'm like, who else would he say that in front of?
Yeah. But that's the best friend component.
Himself with both of us. I'm 100% the same with him as I am with him gone. We're very honest with each other. And I think that that's important. That's not always comfortable, but
totally.
Like I know him and I feel like the long distance allowed us to kind of find ourselves and be ourselves within a relationship.
Yeah. And I think it's a dance. And in the beginning, especially of let's say like the first 6 months, the first 3 months of talking to someone, first 3 months, you're still really getting to know like who you're dealing with.
Yeah.
I feel like at that 3-month mark, you really have a good like grip on who this person is. And then you sort of spend that next phase meshing two people together.
Yeah.
And that's, if you're really doing that in a way that's creating a good foundation, it's not just going to be like, oh, we're good. It's like, no, I need this communication and it bothered me when you did this, or I really love it when you do this.
Yeah.
Having those open communications is part of creating that foundation that the whole fucking house goes on top of.
Yeah.
And if you don't do that, if you create your house on, dust instead of cinder block, you've got an issue.
Yeah. Yeah. And it doesn't get better after marriage. I think that some people think that having the label brings like this sense of commitment and
security.
Honestly, it does legally, like it does spiritually. like that holds weight, but it shouldn't be the defining factor of your relationship. I feel like you need to be there in your commitment before you even talk about marriage. Because marriage will just make things harder if you're just then moving in with somebody. Like if you didn't live with them before, so we'll wait until marriage. That can be a big eye-opening experience.
It might not work when you get to that point.
Yeah.
I totally agree. That's like a hot topic, but I completely agree. Like I think doing that before is key for me personally. I also feel like at the end of the day, that I made a joke about this on a podcast episode a couple of weeks ago. And it was like, I have beef with bachelor parties because you see guys on bachelor parties and they roll up and they're like, it's my last day single, bitch. You're not single. You're engaged. It's like very not single. It's actually the complete opposite of single. And I think the guys and the girls, like the people that view relationships that way aren't ready for the commitment. If the thing that makes you committed to the person is that title and like, oh, like I have to be like locked down now. I can't do what I want. It's such a faulty way of thinking because this should be what you want to do.
Yeah.
It should be the person that you want to hang out with, the person that you want to spend time with. Of course, you still want time with your girls, your guys, whatever, but this should be what you want. It shouldn't be like you're forced. I have to like be faithful. No, you shouldn't want to be faithful. You shouldn't want anybody else.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that having your own self inside the relationship is important. I see a lot of times people are like, oh, like my husband's going to play golf again. I love when Rigo goes and plays golf.
Same.
Because that is my me time.
Yeah.
I know that I have a lot of hours where I can go take Santiago to the pool because I love that. That's not a chore for me. Like I don't feel like I'm stuck with the kid. I love to go to the pool and I love taking him and I like to have that quiet time, like when he naps. And then Rigo will take him and I'll do my own thing. So there's that balance that you need to have some independence within your relationship.
So a lot of openness and honesty, you feel like helped you create that good communication and foundation in the beginning, especially long distance, because you don't have the luxury of solving problems physically. And it's not just like, oh, like we can hug and kiss and it's like all fine. Yeah. It's like, no, you actually do have to talk about things.
Yeah.
And was there anything else that you guys did in the beginning when you were long distance? Was it like you always talked at night, or were there any other things that you guys did that you found helpful to build that?
We've always talked a lot. I've always gotten a good morning text.
Still, by the way.
I still will get a good morning text. Sometimes there are days where I'll send a good morning text. And like he always will send something like pretty sweet or cute. We always touch base throughout the day, even if it's quick, just like, how's your day?
Thinking about you. Yeah.
Like just like little quick snippets. And then we always talked at night and we would just talk for hours on the phone. I think that also finding out how you navigate difficult situations is really important, because when you're going through stress or you're going through trauma or anything out of the norm, some people react very differently. And you need to know, can you handle that person in those situations?
And do you feel supported when you're the person?
Yeah. Yeah. And like what kind of support you need is different. But also you can't expect your partner to know exactly what you need. Like you need to be talking to them, telling them like, I need softness and support right now. I'm not looking for your solution.
Yeah. Guys always want to fix it.
Like, and Regal will sometimes ask me, are you venting or do you want advice?
Yeah, good question.
90% of the time, I'm like, I'm just venting. I don't want your advice. I appreciate it, but I don't want it. Because you just like, you want to be able to vent and just not. It's sometimes like when you call.
But what if you pay this and you talk to that person and you're like, that's not what I need. Like, I just want to complain for a minute. Like,
yeah. Yeah, but they wouldn't know that unless you say that. And I think sometimes we expect our partner to know exactly what we want. And they're not going to know unless you help like verbalize what you're actually looking for. And like if they end up not doing it and you verbalized it, then okay, they're not listening to you. They're not willing to give you the support that you need. That's something that you need to look into. But right off the bat, you can't just expect everything to be like easy, no brainer. He knows exactly what I need, exactly what I want. Like,
Totally. So I love the question. So like, are you venting or do you want a solution? Basically is a great question. The other thing that I always tell people specifically like with grief, but I guess honestly, it could be about anything that I always appreciated is like, hey, I don't know how to help, but I want to.
Yeah.
What's the best way I can show up for you right now?
Yeah.
Because that kind of applies to any situation, whether it's like you lost your job and you're looking for someone, you're like fighting with a friend, you lost someone, you are having a shitty day, you're feeling down on yourself, whatever it is, just being like, I don't exactly know the right way to show up or I don't exactly know the best thing to say right now. How can I help?
Yeah.
Like that simple question to me has always signified, I'm here, I want to help, but I don't know what to do. And that's like so understandable.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Especially if they haven't gone through something of that magnitude. I do feel like Rigo and I's relationship started off very much with a lot happening at one time.
Is that like right when you lost your dad?
Well, so first he broke his leg and lost his job and had to have surgery. And at that time, his mom had gotten diagnosed with breast cancer and was going through chemotherapy. He had a new niece. So there were just a lot of things happening at one time. And so I would go back and forth between Stephenville and Midland.
How far is it?
Every weekend. It was like 4 hours and I would take him to physical therapy and help him with that and like help navigate that.
How long had you guys been dating when that all happened?
Not very long, like within the first year, all of that happened. And then I lost my dad. And that is something that like he never got to meet my dad.
Yeah.
My dad had a birthday.
Your dad knew about him because you were together. He just didn't meet him.
So Rigo was invited to go to the cabin because my dad was building a lake house at the time. And we were all going to go out and look at kind of the progress. So we were staying at a cabin for his birthday with the whole family.
Is that why you guys all go to the lake?
Yeah.
Okay.
And yeah, then we go to the lake every Father's Day or the river, like any body of water. And Rigo was supposed to be going to that. And he broke his leg. So I just got not able to drive from Midland to Austin to meet my dad. And then my dad ended up passing that same month, a couple weeks after his birthday.
It's kind of crazy because I do feel like as hard as those things are, it's like one of those things where in a weird way, it was like a spiritual passing of the baton of like your dad. And then like Rigo steps in and is like your person, you know?
Yeah. And I was really young. Like I had just turned 21. And I had lost my dad and I was in my senior year of college.
I have like full body chills.
And like it was a lot. And Rigo had no idea how to support me in that.
Yeah.
But he was there for everything. And like we just figured it out and we worked it out. And I feel like that being vulnerable with your partner is so important to give them a better understanding of how you work.
Mm-hmm.
And that will allow them to know, like, how do I support you? How can I support you? Because there will be times where your partner just can't support you. And maybe that means that they aren't the partner for you if you guys can't support each other in the ways that you need. But I think that you have to give each other a chance to figure that out.
Like a fair shot, which looks like communicating.
Yeah, it looks like communicating.
I also think you need to communicate with them but also be receptive when they communicate with you too. I think it's easy for the ego to get involved and to feel like offended. If someone doesn't like the way they're handling something or like the first snap reaction can kind of be to feel offended. And then I think you have to pull back and be like, if you really love the person, it's like, no, like ultimately the goal here is to be a team and work together. So yeah, please do tell me what you need. And I think receiving things in like an open and positive way, and being willing to work on them goes both ways. Like it should be very reciprocal. But I also think that encourages people to then come and talk to you about things when they need things handled differently or when something's bothering them. And that's the ultimate goal, right? Like to have that open communication that goes back and forth between two people.
Yeah.
If you get mad when someone brings up how they feel, they don't want to bring it up to you.
No. And I think that part of that is knowing yourself and knowing the things that you need, knowing what triggers you, what sets you off. I know that I get very overstimulated. So I'm cooking, the vent fan's on, the TV's on, the dog wants something.
Overstimulation is so real.
And I will snap in those moments. And I absolutely know that. So like, what do I do in those situations? Like I tell Rigo, like I'm feeling like very overstimulated right now. And then he's known me long enough, like we've gone through this long enough where he's like, okay, I know what that means. But initially in the relationship, I would just snap. I would just freak out. And he would be like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Like, whoa, wow.
Yeah. And knowing him, he probably made a joke, which is like more annoying in those moments. And you're like,
yeah, the rage. And so like there were times that, yes, you still are going to have those times where you don't react in a good way, but like you should constantly see progress in your relationship. Like it's not going to fly off the bat and like, man, he knows everything and understands everything. Like, no, there were years where I wasn't communicating that like I am flying off the handle right now because of this.
Yeah.
As soon as I could figure out how to like verbalize that and explain that, but that took me looking in myself, like, why am I so upset right now? What is triggering?
What's the root cause of why I'm actually bothered?
Yes. And like having, obviously it helps if you go to therapy or you see a psychiatrist or a psychologist, whatever you need. But that was something that helped me kind of figure out why I was being triggered. And a lot of that can be like mental health disorders, like ADHD, understanding how that works, how your brain works, because that can come to fruition in many different ways for people.
Anxiety.
Yeah, anxiety can make you, like for me, it can make me very sensitive and very quick to snap.
And by the way, this is also applicable in like friendships and stuff too. Like, you know, so I never struggled with anxiety in my like everyday life until like some work things I feel like were like a little bit triggering for me, which I think like triggered me to have some of that anxiety.
Yeah.
And it's, I would say I more have like situational anxiety probably. And now that is something that like every once in a while I do struggle with. And I feel like you've seen this and there'll be times when I've had to be like, I'm just feeling really anxious right now.
Yeah.
Cause it's like, it then also kind of makes everything make sense. It's like, oh, someone may seem irritable or whatever. And it's like, I'm just feeling anxious right now.
Yeah.
And even having that open communication with your friends or like with anybody really, I think is super healthy because it allows them to know like where you are.
Yeah.
And any of those times that we've ever like had that dialogue with each other about how either one of us are feeling, it's like, okay, this isn't about me or today, or this is just like, I'm just feeling a little anxious today. And it's like so much easier to give somebody grace when you know where they're at.
Yeah. And any relationship that you're in, like that's only going to benefit you if you can like really try to understand the person that you are talking to and the person that you have that relationship with.
Totally. And I think be willing to be understood too.
Yeah.
Everything has to go like both ways like that.
Yeah.
What are characteristics that you feel like people should look for in a partner that are like universally good characteristics for like long-term healthy relationships?
I think that this goes for friendships, coworkers, really any relationship in your life. Go for a team player. I feel like very few times in life will you have a very comfortable relationship with somebody if they are very self-focused and very much like an I. I think, being a team player, that's going to play into every single thing that you do. Housework, taking care of your pet, taking care of a kid, finances.
Totally.
Like you don't want to be with somebody that you feel like is isolating themselves. That's also going to come into like, how do you guys support each other? If they're very self-focused, they're going to have trouble supporting you. They're going to feel like you need to always be supporting them. Their work is more important. Their priorities are the family's priorities. So I feel like a team player,
which also makes you feel like less than in the situation because and when they make everything about themselves constantly, I did this, I need that, don't do this, don't post that, it's like makes you feel like, I mean, I've been in that situation on the other side, you know, and it made me feel like I'm not like important. I'm not as important as you. And that's hard.
And that will like diminish your self-worth the longer for sure you're in that relationship and will make you second guess yourself. And then I feel like that snowballs.
Totally. I mean, I think as women, like your self-worth, intuition are like two of the most important things that we have. And like when you let someone whittle away at that with the little moments of like I'm more important than you, and what you're doing is not good enough, it's detrimental for sure. That's a really good one. So team player, that actually brings me to like a different question that I feel like it's 2024. Obviously, everyone has different views on how relationships should be, like how traditional versus modern. Do you feel like your relationship is? Do you guys have things where it's like Rigo does this, you do this? Or is it like everyone's a team player, everybody does everything? It's just about like who's on first. Like you fill in where you need to, day dependent, or is it like...
We're very much team players when everything is going like accordingly, and our work is very balanced, like very much even with like house chores, cooking.
But are there like different things, like he does this house chore and you do this one? Or is it like you both cook, you both do everything?
We both cook, we both clean, we both take care of bottles. Like the one thing that I can say without a doubt that I will always do is I do bath time. I always do bath time. And then 9 times out of 10, he'll do the dishes after cooking. So if I cook, like he might do dishes and then I'll go take Santi up to bath time. Or if it's not a bath day, then like I'll do dishes and he'll hang out with Santi in the living room. So that is something that like I will always do.
I love a guy that...
It's so fun.
No, it's so... Yeah, so bath time's way better than dishes.
That's everything getting come to my house too. I feel like I'll never do it. So
I feel like a guy that does dishes is such a green flag. For me, it's like you were raised well, like you got told like get in there, help out. Like the guys that just like sit on their ass after dinner. So I'm not inspired to cook for you.
Yeah. Like I'm not serving you. We are serving each other. We're sharing the plates together and we're sitting down together.
For sure.
But no, yeah. So we're kind of ebbs and flows. And like
depending on the
he's out of town, like obviously I'm doing it all. And so, kind of just depends.
What are ways you guys have consciously like kept it spicy over the past 10 years? Because I feel like whenever I'm around you and Rigo, he's like more verbal about it than you, but he's like still so obsessed with you, like 11 years into being together. And I know you're obsessed with him too. You're just like more low key about it. But what are ways that you guys have like kept it spicy and still like had that attraction and like hardcore like chemistry and desire after 11 years? Because I think a lot of people struggle with that.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember like when we were 7 years in, I was like, oh, gosh, everybody talks about the 7-year itch. Like I'm so nervous. And it was fine. It's just kind of falling in love with your partner every day. And I feel like a lot of times he really will praise me in so many ways, and like
he hypes you up constantly.
Yeah. And is always like texting me something if he sees me on your stories. Like he will like probably message you something about it, but then
he's like, oh, it's the hottest girl I've ever seen. Like,
yeah. And he'll always text me about it. So he's constantly hyping me up, but I do think also knowing what your partner needs, in the bedroom,
what they're into,
what are they into? What do they need sex more often?
Yeah.
Than you do?
Do you guys just have like an open conversation about that?
Absolutely.
Is it like
fully open?
What's your ideal? How many times a week do you want to have sex? What's ideal? Is that like what the conversation looks like?
Kind of, or more so it's like, do you feel like we've kind of been lagging in the sex area?
Yeah.
Like, are you feeling a little bit like, we're not really like, I'm not meeting you where you need it. And we talk about that. And like, we might have like really busy weeks, but like we do always, it's not like, okay, it's 6 p.m. Like, got to put the baby to sleep and we need to go to bed.
Because obviously that's not
like, no, not at all. But it's just like remembering that you need to like make time for each other
and check in. Because I feel like even that ebbs and flows, right? Like what you guys both want and need like right after having a baby is going to be different than what you both want and need 6 years in, different than what it's going to be when Santi's 2. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's always also going to ebb and flow.
Yeah.
And do you feel like you equally bring that stuff up? Like, is it both people are kind of like checking in to see how things are?
Yeah. Yeah. Because for me, mine is I have more like emotional needs. And for him, it's more like physical needs. And so we will like have that conversation and we'll be like, oh, like, I feel like I'm not super duper getting like my emotional needs right now.
Which makes
and not as into it. Yes. But like I can verbalize that. And I think that's where like you have to be open with your partner and tell them what you're lacking, and you have to be able to take that and like you said, not get offended by it, because it can initially, when you first start having like really open conversations, it can feel like very raw,
personal,
and you can feel very like they're just not into me.
Yeah.
Like they don't think that I'm sexy. Like they don't think that I want to like be physical with them. Yeah, it can feel very raw. So like you do need to navigate it. You need to work through it, and you need to continue to talk about it to where it becomes more like, this is
like less taboo.
Every conversation is like
a negative,
like negative. It's like, oh, it's just brought up. Like we went through it. Like Rio and I very few times fight and stay mad for a long time. Like we don't have that.
Yeah.
Like we fight, might be a big fight, and then normally like we're the next day
move through it.
Like, going back. You know?
What are things you do to like get like round that out? Because sometimes I feel like if I get mad at someone or like annoyed, it's hard for me to like get like, how do you move through that?
I feel like there are times when you're having a conversation that's very intense, and if you feel like it's not being productive and you feel like neither of you are getting each other's point, then maybe just verbalize that to each other, tell each other this. I don't think that we're going in circles. Like, and take a step back and just say, let's revisit this a little bit later. And then, try like when you're going throughout your day, not to keep bringing it up.
That's what I was going to say. Like
when you're both like a little bit more zen about it and you've had a chance to really understand how you're feeling and then how you saw how they came into the conversation, and then kind of process it.
Yeah. Like be willing to let it go. Cause I feel like that's something I've learned like the older I've gotten, being willing to let it go versus like, if you can't get over it, if you're just going to hold on to it and like beat a dead horse, you're not going to be able to be productive. It's also hard to want to sit down and have a conversation with someone when it's like they're just going to bring it up in 3 hours and they're still not over it.
Yeah.
And there's going to be times like that, right? There's definitely going to be instances where one time like isn't enough of talking about it, and you do need to revisit it and, hey, I want to check in about this, and like, has this happened again, or like whatever, right? Like there's going to be times when you do have to like circle back on something for sure. But I think for the most part, like then when it's over, it's over.
Yeah.
And not like revisiting that next time you're mad. Well, the one time you did this, and it's like you get in like an unhealthy cycle of like never letting anything go.
Yeah. And like constantly bringing it up or letting it impact your regular day where you're like taking jabs at the person throughout the day, and it's just impacting how you just have a regular conversation with them. I think that can kind of make the situation a little bit more toxic.
And I think like being someone's like place to land and like where like they want to be around you is so nice. If you're constantly like complaining, there's a difference in communicating and constantly complaining and berating someone and making them feel like they're never enough. Let me caveat this by saying like I've definitely dated people who had like a hardcore victim mentality, which is so annoying because you can't give them feedback without them being like, oh, I can't do anything right. You just don't like me. And it's like, fuck, man. Like that's brutal too. So I think like the way the person receives it is so key. Yeah. But making sure that you're like a place someone wants to come. Mm-hmm. And for the most part, it stays like honest, but like loving in a positive way. But you're coming from a good place rather than like nagging someone all the time. Because it's just annoying. Like nobody wants to deal with that. So when you need to give negative feedback, like if your needs aren't being met or you're not feeling like loved, or you don't feel like the person's like stepping up in the way that they need to, like how do you give like a negative feedback? Because that's different than just communicating, here's what I need like overall. But if like something's being done where you're like, this like really bothered me.
I normally will like, it takes me a bit of time to process. So I do like to like kind of sit on it and understand why I'm feeling upset about it and what it is exactly that is bothering me, because I feel like if I can't communicate it well, then it's not going to be like understood.
Yeah, smart.
So I kind of think about like, okay, how do I want to say this? How do I want to bring it up in a way that is going to land? Like, how does my partner react best to things being brought up? And then normally, like I just am like, look, I feel like I haven't been getting a lot of attention lately. Like, it is hurting my feelings. I do understand you are very busy right now, and I am giving you grace with that. But I just want to let you know that like I am feeling like a little bit neglected right now.
Yeah.
And then but I do like take into account what is going on with that person.
Giving him grace too.
Yeah. And so like I tried, like this is a very recent situation, obviously, like with him traveling for work and like being really busy. Like, so I understand how stressed he is and so I'm taking in like my feelings are here. Why do I think he's acting that way and having trouble? Like, well, people only have so much of a bandwidth.
Mm-hmm.
And right now he's
stretched
care of a kid and he's also stretched really thin. So this isn't going to be the time where I'm going to pile on to him and be like, you didn't do this for me. You haven't done this. Yeah. Like it's more just telling him, I know that you are very stressed.
Yeah.
I'm feeling a little bit sensitive about it. And I'm feeling a little bit neglected. Like I understand it's a season and totally working through it. And it's like also just not allowing things to be the end all be all. I understand this is a season and we've already gotten through like that hard part of a season.
I think too, there's so much beauty. And like I recently was saying this, I think there's so much beauty. And if you know someone is like your person and you want to work through like whatever it is life comes at you, having this like general baseline understanding that like it's not that fragile.
Yeah.
Like for me in the past, when I've been with the wrong person, like I've had this feeling of like when things aren't going well, it's like, okay, I'm good. I'm out. Like, which I think ultimately did serve me because they weren't the right people for me.
Yeah.
But I think that there needs to be like this mindset switch when you do find that person that you want to like see where things go with, or you like, you maybe don't know if it's like the person for forever, like immediately, but it could be enough. Like you love that person enough to say like, I want to see where this goes. I do see like a future and I do see potential here. So I want to see where that takes me. And I think the mindset switch needs to almost be like, this isn't that fragile. We will have ups and downs. We will have disagreements. We will have hard seasons. We will have good times. We will have all of these things. And there is going to be an ebb and flow, but it's not like if something goes wrong, like it's not, this person's not for me. Like there needs to be less fragility to that.
Yeah.
And like, I think that's basically what you're saying too, which is like understanding there's going to be a season and a time, but also understanding that reason, right? Like understanding here's maybe why you're doing that. But I think what we were saying earlier, it's still so important to communicate that because maybe you are feeling a little bit neglected. Like you're not getting as much attention because he's stretched thin. And maybe eventually that could lead to him feeling like, okay, now our sex life is falling off. Yeah. And you're like, well, it's because I'm over here not feeling as loved as I normally do or whatever. And now I'm not feeling as sexual because I think as women, like foreplay legit starts with that good morning.
Yes.
Like we need like...
You have to feel connected, like emotionally.
Yes. We need to feel connected. I mean, I can't speak for everyone, but I think the majority of women, that's where men and women are like built differently. A man can like see his woman looking hot and he's like, I want to bang. Yeah. But like for us, it's like, but you haven't hugged me today and you didn't tell me you love me. And I don't have that good morning text. Like that's like what gets us going. Yeah. So it's sort of like that medium thing, right? So, do you feel like there's different things that you have done to nourish and like water your friendship versus your relationship? Or have they sort of all been like one thing that has like grown together as you give it attention, the relationship attention as a whole?
It's been one thing that's kind of so intertwined. I can't separate one from the other. But I do think the friendship was the basis of a good relationship for us.
And I love what you say too, like having like, and I obviously have spent like a good amount of time around Rigo and like, I know the jokes that he makes and stuff. And it's like being able to like laugh at that also like allows him to be able to tell it, right? Like, I think sometimes if you get like too oversensitive about something, then he doesn't want to say it in front of you, not you guys, but like the collective you, and it's like finding that balance between like, okay, I'm in a relationship now. I want to respect this person. And there are probably some jokes that like need to go at this point. And then some that can stay and then you being understanding. So it's this like dance of meshing two people together is a process. Yeah. And I think anytime it's not a process, it's one of two things. Like someone's not being honest. It's not like you're not actually doing the work to do it. It's this sort of like put a Band-Aid on it thing versus like really intertwining your life with someone. Yeah. Or it's like just not going to work because you're almost like one person is people pleasing their way through it. And then like eventually they're like, well, I actually feel all these ways, Yeah. So learning in the first couple of months of the relationship to communicate, I feel like is so key for the overall health and longevity of a relationship.
Yeah.
The last sort of like segment I want to touch on, because obviously this changes things, is like being a new mom. So like a new mom, highs and lows, and like how has that like shifted your relationship in positive or negative ways?
I think that when you have a newborn, you can kind of go through that roommate phase. But we really worked hard not to go through that.
Same things that you did that we talked about earlier, like communicating and like just sort of.
Yes. And then just having a supportive partner, knowing what I was getting into before having a kid, I think was really helpful. And us understanding each other before we had a kid. Because I think that complicates things. So if we weren't communicating well and he wasn't willing to like listen beforehand, it's not going to get any better when there's a child involved.
Yeah, totally. People do that to fix the relationship sometimes, and it's obviously just going to make it harder.
It makes it so much
more beautiful, and like you're more connected because you made a human together. But like if you already have issues, it just amplifies them.
Yeah, absolutely. Because the experience of having a newborn, really, you are exhausted. You are just trying to survive.
So you're like more irritable. So if you don't know how to deal with that, it compounds and you're not sleeping and you're obviously not having sex for a couple of weeks. It's sort of,
Yeah. So no, that absolutely was honestly, I feel like it deepened our relationship. And I do feel like I worked hard to still have those like moments with Rigo and like make sure that we still had our alone time. Because I do think that is very important, and it's very important to understand
totally
where your partner is and where you are. And you don't feel as connected. Like if you're not having serious conversations, you don't feel as connected if you're not hugging each other.
The physical touch part.
Like that is important. And sometimes I feel like you can forget that and you can just be so caught up in how busy your life is. And it's like, when's the last time like I sat down with my partner and like we held hands and we cuddled and like we kissed.
Yeah.
Like those are moments that can really like make you feel like back on track and feel like very comforted.
I think especially as women, like we need that. Like men need the physicality in like a more sexual way, I think a lot of times, but we need like the little things to even get there. And it's also where like the friendship part plays a big role because you do have to be a team. I think if you have you end up having a kid with a partner who isn't supportive of you, you feel like you're doing it alone. And then it's like too much. Like it's overwhelming. It's kind of impossible.
Like resentment.
Totally.
And it's hard enough to do it with a partner. And doing it alone, I can't.
I think too, it's like having the understanding that a good, healthy relationship between the two of you and prioritizing that sometimes is actually what's going to be good and healthy for your kid as well.
Yeah.
Like so many people are like the kid 24/7, which like, look, as a parent, there's like having a kid is unlike any love that you will ever experience. It's like a literal human being that you made. Like you can't feel that any other way to a degree, right? But it's like also loving your partner in a way and keeping that healthy and strong is what's going to create the most well-rounded and best thing. Like if you don't have that, then it's tough.
Yeah, that's a harder household for your kid to grow up in and experience. And that's not healthy.
Which is like a whole other topic. And again, whenever people ask me about divorce, it's always like, do everything absolutely everything you can. If at the end of the day, like this person isn't meeting you halfway, you don't feel supported, you don't feel loved, like you just don't feel like it's your person at the end of the day. For me personally, can't speak to other people, go to therapy, do all the things. For me personally, having, as much as it sucks, like I miss Kinsley so much every other week when she's with Alex, it's like really shitty, obviously. I would rather have her be able to like focus on that and have her in a house that I know is going to be filled with love when she's there half of the time, than have 100% of the time in like turmoil that is not going to be good for her. That's just my personal POV. But obviously like the goal is to not end up there through things like the communicating and like doing all these things. But it is a scenario where both people have to be willing. If only one person is willing and you're dealing with someone else that won't communicate, that doesn't know how, that doesn't have the tools, isn't willing to learn them, doesn't care, whatever, has struggles with their own, issues, whatever it is, like, and isn't making any progress with you, you can't drag them along for forever. And I think that is like really hard too. So all of this is pretty much predicated on like both people do need to put in that effort.
Yeah. And you have to recognize the partner that you have. Like, I do think that we all have in our gut, like, this person is not listening. They have not listened. They're not respecting what I'm telling them. That's probably not going to change.
Yeah, not going to be my person ultimately.
Yeah. And like, you have to recognize that and understand that you can't change the way that they are.
Yeah.
Like, they have to want to like be growing. Everybody grows and changes throughout their life. Yes. But your goal in the relationship can't be to change that person. Like, oh, he'll be perfect if he just fixes these few things.
Totally.
You have to take them as they are and then hope that both of you continue to grow into better people.
See enough compatibility and connection with them to want to work through those things together.
Yeah.
You can't expect anybody to be perfect and show up day one. To me, that's giving like sociopath. If it's just like, everything fits perfectly, it's like, are they molding themselves just to be what you want? Like, that's kind of creepy to me. Versus like having those real open conversations and being like, I love this person enough to have this conversation and make progress. Like, that's the goal.
Yeah.
This has been such a good episode. We actually didn't even get through like so many questions. So I think we're going to have to do a part 2 to this one. What do you think?
Yeah. And
all right. Thanks for coming on this episode of Courtside with Courtney. Don't forget to follow along and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.